Ooh, speaking of things that suck, this is a Buffalo Bills network, first and foremost. So the three of us focus on Kendall and I also focus on the Bills. We focus on things holistically across the league. Oof, rough performance today for the Buffalo Bills in New York, but not one that holistically, I don't want to say I don't want to play it off like it wasn't surprising, but the three of us have talked about the New York Jets multiple times on this show.
A lot on this show. We like the New Jersey teams.
We do like the
worth.
Jersey teams. We've been getting them a lot of play. And we talked about this in last week's episode, focusing more on the Zach Wilson piece and the loss for the Jets to New England, because prior episodes, we had talked about the, kind of quote unquote realness of the New York Jets in terms of what they were doing on defense and how much we liked the players that they brought in, the scheme changes, the structure changes, what Robert Saleh was doing, how good Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson have been. I mean, well, the three of us loved both of those guys, but especially Garrett Wilson coming out of the draft. The Jets were doing a lot of good things, but then they lose to New England. I feel like the expectations maybe came down a little bit, or a little air comes out of the balloon. You lose Breece Hall, you lose Elijah Vera Tucker, and you're going into a game against the 6-1 Buffalo Bills, who even when they play poorly are still beating the hell out of teams. And you come out strong and you put a good performance on both sides of the ball. We'll start with this and this big win for the New York Jets versus the Buffalo Bills. Kendall, we'll start with you as we go around the horn here. What's your big takeaway here in this game? Is it on the Jets side? Is it on the Bills side? Where does it lie? What is it? Where are your thoughts at for this game?
I think it's really reliant on Zach Wilson and the kind of bounce back performance that he had. I mean, literally a week off of, this episode where we talked about him last week and begged the question, is he a franchise quarterback specifically for the Jets? And, we all had our issues with it given the way he's performed to this point, but he's got all the tools in the world to succeed. And you saw it this week. He has all the tools. He just needs to minimize mistakes. And that's what he did this week. I think there's a lot of, reacting from what happened last week. You learn from your mistakes and you self-scout yourself and you can see, okay, really easy fix. Throw the ball out of bounds here. Really easy fix. Your internal clock shouldn't be rushed by non-existent pass rush. Like little things like that can be dialed back or at least be made aware of if you're the quarterback and really the head guy for this team, the engine that really runs this team. And let's be honest, he was holding them back last week. And I think he looked at himself and he realized, I can't do that. I just need to play within the structure of this offense. And if I can do that, then we can win this game. And they had an excellent game plan by, holding on to the ball as much as possible, limiting the opportunities that the Bills had the ball, running the ball successfully, a lot of loop and jet action motions pre-snap to kind of get the Bills defense flowing one way and then kind of cut it back with the run the opposite direction. It was a really solid game plan from them, and it was well executed by Wilson. He didn't have like a crazy stat line or anything like that, but go back to it, he just didn't make mistakes. And with his team holding on to the football and sticking to that game plan of if you don't make mistakes and you have the ball more than they do, or at least you have more opportunities to score than they do, you give yourself a better probability to win the game. And that's what they did. And they also relied on that stout defense that they have. And it showed up once again.
Something we talked about last week, the three of us, and Russ, you and I especially, like how Zach Wilson, my Wilson's confused here, how Zach Wilson was struggling to make plays out of the pocket. Like his mobility was such a plus for him coming into this league, but he was struggling to make plays out of the pocket. And then you combine that with the Bills' ability to pressure the quarterback and the Jets' inability to protect Zach Wilson. And it seemed like kind of an easy thing today of just like, well, the Bills are going to get pressure on Zach Wilson. He'll be uncomfortable and we'll go from there. But to Kendall's point, he was able to sit within the structure of the play. Like he wasn't flush from the pocket too much. He was able to sit and read and react. And when he did have to scramble a little bit, like he looked more composed. Like that was a big takeaway from me. Like the Bills allowed him. Yes, the Bills allowed him to be poised, allowed him to be comfortable. You did not see that frenetic Zach Wilson. I mean, how much too the Bills are playing off coverage a lot of this game. And Zach Wilson, a guy who loves to predetermine where he's going to go and loves to hit his first read, he was able to 1, 2, 3. Oh, cool. My first read. Boom. And just milk that time and time again. They didn't really make Zach Wilson have to earn or work for too much. Russ, kick it to you now. Same thing. Are you focusing on the Jets side of the ball? Are you focusing on the Bills side? What's your big takeaway or major takeaway coming out of this big win for the Jets?
Yeah, I'm looking at the Bill side of things here. I mean, just offensively, looking at Josh Allen, 18 of 34. He was sacked 5 times in this game. Devin Singletary only averaged 3 yards per carry. And I know, we've talked and hyped up about the Jets defense quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, but this is just one of those games where it felt like, we're talking about the Buffalo Bills. This is a team that can put points up on anybody at any given time, and it felt like at certain moments in certain spots of this game, they couldn't get positive yardage. Josh Allen was getting sacked. There was big incompletions. You just can't have that. You have to find the consistencies within your offense, and they didn't show that today. And I don't know if it's just because maybe they felt the same way I did about the Jets going into this game, that the Jets are fraudulent in a sense. And, I think they are a good football team, but at the same time, I thought the Jets were starting to come back to earth, and then they just punt, kind of punch Buffalo in the mouth here today. And I was just surprised. And, props to the Jets defense for what they were able to do, getting the pressures. Whether it was Quan Alexander blitzing up the middle, Quinnen Williams up the middle, they were happy to have Jermaine Johnson back, who I think we were all big fans of coming out of Florida State during the draft last year. So to see him get out there and get a sack and come back healthy, like, it's good to see when you root for football from that perspective. But the Bills have to, I don't know, have a little soul searching here offensively. I know it's crazy to say, hey, 17 points isn't good enough, but it's most weeks in the NFL, it's not. Like, you have to score. We know that. And then just defensively for Buffalo, missed tackles after missed tackles, guys not just doing what they're supposed to be doing, injury after injury. When Elam went down, that was one of those moments where I was like, oh God, here we go. And Trey White wasn't active. So it's kind of just a mix of both on both sides of the football. I think long-term they're going to be okay, but these next 2-3 weeks could be, kind of put the pedal back to the metal, if you will, and kind of figure it out, because it just kind of seemed like they were going to be in cruise control for a little while.
Yeah. This game is such a good example of how a specific matchup can cause problems, like, for the game holistically. The Jets, I thought, coming into this game, had a large advantage with their defensive line against the Bills' offensive line. Their group this year with Quinnen Williams and Franklin Myers and Sheldon Rankins and Bryce Huff, who had a huge strip of Josh Allen today. Even Jacob Martin was looking good for them until they shipped him off, and then that allowed them to get Jermaine Johnson back into the lineup. Even Nathan Shepard, number 97, he had a couple quality reps today. He had a couple quality reps last week against New England too, just owning the interior. I thought that was a big matchup advantage for the Jets, and I don't think the Bills mitigated that matchup enough today. They were ineffective running the ball, and honestly didn't even try to go to it a majority of the time.
Yeah.
And when you do that, that allows, I hate that we're always talking about running the ball, or at least I am when it comes to the Buffalo Bills. But when you do that and you allow a strong defensive line and a good defense to just be able to sit back and be like, oh, they're just going to pass. Okay, cool. They're just going to pass. Like, they don't have to honor anything else. And as the game went on, you saw more and more Carl Lawson starting to get pressure, Quinnen Williams starting to get pressure, Huff starting to get pressure. You saw them starting to realize, like, well, we don't have to honor the run and we can just keep pushing forward. And I said this in a tweet after the game. The Bills' offense is Josh Allen. Like, the Bills' offense is, we have a unicorn and we rely on him to be a unicorn, which is fine. And when it works, it's awesome. But what's tough is when that unicorn doesn't make unicorn plays and he's just a regular guy for the day, you have to be able to do something else, whether that's schematically, whether that's with the run game, whether that's scheming some things open and picking out some areas. The Bills did not do that. The adjustment piece wasn't there from Ken Dorsey in this game. The run game was not there, whether it was because they weren't executing or because it just wasn't being called. I think it's probably a mix of both, which I want to get into the tape and see. But I thought they played into the Jets' hands relatively well. And then you add in the Josh Allen piece. He was not on today. Both of those interceptions that he threw were, I understand the Sauce Gardner one a little more. I think he thought Sauce was going to sit and not sink. And it was just like, oh, I read the wrong thing and threw an interception. But the first one, like, what I know Charles Davis was trying to say, like, oh, he thinks Knox is going to flatten out, but Knox was already almost turned and upfield when Josh Allen.
I thought maybe the pass rush was blocking the pass defender. I want to see the end zone angle on that to see if that's even true or not, but it looked bad on broadcast.
It did. It looked like he threw it right to him. And so I definitely have, worries for that. And the Bills run defense on the other side of the ball. I said it on Disguised Coverage last week. the whole conversation of like how they got run on versus the Packers, like, well, they let it because it was game script versus the people who were like, no, the run defense is in trouble. Like, I thought it was a mix of both. Like, the game script definitely played a role, but also Green Bay did several things in that game that I thought teams could replicate going forward. And it's funny, Kendall, that you mentioned some of them, like using those motions and those alignments to pull defenders from the box or get the Bills defense to flow to the right and then hit them back to the left. That ability to create leverage and or add gaps. The Jets did that multiple times in this game. And I thought that area would be an advantage for the Bills the way it was for the Jets. I thought the Jets D-line versus the Bills O-line was clear advantage Jets. I thought the same thing on the other side of the ball. It's like, well, the Bills defensive line is going to eat the Jets offensive line. The last bastion of and pillar of strength they had was Elijah Vera Tucker. Dwayne Brown has been fine, but has been injured and up and down. Laken Tomlinson hasn't achieved what they wanted him to. And then from the right side over, it's just kind of like question marks. But they were able to mitigate the Bills front in the way the Bills offensive line was not able to mitigate the Jets front. And so I think a lot of it comes down to poor execution from the Bills and a lack of adjustment, but also I really think we got to tip our cap to this Jets team that we all we were pumping that balloon these first like 4, 5, 6 weeks. And then after last week, we were like, well, it finally came back to earth. Like, here we are. Yep. And I think we all thought they were a good team, but I thought this game, I thought the biggest matchup advantage on either side of the ball for either team was Jets D-line versus Bills O-line. But I didn't think that was holistically enough to turn the tide of this game. And I think this is also another example of why you need a pivot in the run game, like what it allows you to do, what it helps you with. And now we're sitting here with the New York Jets at 6-3. So that kind of washes out their loss to the Patriots last week. They're in second in the division because they also have a win against the Miami Dolphins, who are also 6-3. So the Jets are second in the AFC East. They now hold the tiebreaker against the Buffalo Bills. Ooh, like who knows what this team could potentially do, like going down the stretch. Again, a lot of it though I think still hinges on Zach Wilson. Even for the Jets winning today, I wasn't tremendously impressed. I think he did enough. He did enough to win, which is fine. Maybe you get Corey Davis back and you get some more weapons there, but are the Jets a playoff team? Are we there right now? You think they make the playoffs?
I was about to blame you for the loss because of a couple of weeks ago you were like, the Jets are a playoff team. I think this is a playoff team. I don't think they are.
My fault. I take the blame.
I mean,
I own it.
But I guess it's possible, right? Like if Garrett Wilson keeps doing what he's doing, and if Zach Wilson doesn't turn the football over, and if
the
Michael
schedule is doable.
That's
it really is.
Let's look at, so they have a bye week next week. Then they're at New England versus the Bears, at Minnesota, at Buffalo, versus Detroit, versus Jacksonville, at Seattle, at Miami. They have 6 wins right now. They realistically, they could have 10 wins. They could beat New England, beat Chicago, beat Detroit, sorry, Russ, and beat Jacksonville. Like they have a realistic path, like not even overshooting too much. They have a realistic path where they could hit 10 wins.
Yeah, the Bears have looked good. The Jags have been
realistic.
It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, it's realistic, but none of those games for them are going to be like an absolute walk-in and cakewalk. Like
for sure.
And it's the NFL. We know the NFL, there's no cakewalk. Like if you're playing against the Colts right now, the way that's looking, okay, you probably are going to win that one. But aside from the Lions aren't going to back down.
Yeah.
Honestly, like what team in the NFL right now, like when you look at it, they're like the Colts are the team that is like, man, like they're dog shit. Like they're bad.
Even the Texans put up a fight every week.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, and that's a huge part. That's also, I think, a reminder too for like, man, people need to watch other teams before they make such like concrete and or severe statements that are at the ends of the spectrum. There was a lot of chatter. Again, we're keyed into a lot of Bills stuff. There was a lot of chatter this week about how the Jets are, just going to get completely waxed and they're a bad team and this and that. And it came from, appreciate you, Yellow Blackbird, saying thank you to the Cover One team. Appreciate the hard work. We appreciate you for the kind words and for being here. Also, that's an adorable bird as your icon. So we appreciate you. There was a lot of talk for, the Jets are going to get like waxed. I had a lot of comments in my mentions today, like the Bills should have dog walked the Jets, yada, yada. They're not a bad football team. And to your point, Russ, like there's not really a lot of bad football teams in general this year. Like everybody seems to put up a fight regardless. Granted, some teams have injuries and there's some game script aspects, but this is a big year for parity in the NFL where it seems like on any given week, the team that's the favorite, should they wax this other team? Sure. I mean, how many comments did we see? Man, the Eagles are only beating the Texans by this many points right now. Like, what is going on? Granted, I think there's some wonkiness with Thursday night games, but the Texans came in, and who knows if the Texans decide not to just play cover 2 every single friggin' time and allow Jalen Hurts to hit hole shots, who knows? Maybe that game is even a little more different. But the Eagles have been a machine, and the Texans gave them a problem. You can't look the other way on any team, regardless of what you think the matchup is or you think this team's record. And not to mention, too, how many people just box score watch or see records and be like, oh, this team's only 3-5. Pff, they must suck. We're going to kill them.
Or
and then they're left scratching
helmet scout and just say, oh, it's the same old Jets.
Good point. It is not the same old Jets. This is probably the best football team I've ever seen. No, I'm just kidding. But I think they realistically, 9 wins, 10 wins, I don't think is a far cry.
Yeah.
It's helpful that they're 6-3 going into the bye. And if this offense gets a little healthier, I think the big problem that's really going to hold them back, that offensive line, sooner or later, it has reared its head aside from today. But I think that will catch up to them at some point.
Yeah, I think it's that and the combination of how that could draw out some inconsistent play from Wilson. Because at the end of the day, this all does rely on Wilson. Like you said, he didn't play a great game, but he played well enough. And if he can do that, if he can consistently play well enough and be a guy they can win with, then they're fine. But, is he ever going to show us those times where they're winning because of him or they're losing because of him? Like, that's the kind of the spectrum where it's like, where are we going to see Zach Wilson and where does he fall on this spectrum? Are we going to see a kind of even keel or are we going to see this peaks and valleys kind of Zach Wilson? Because if we see that, then that 9-10 win output like we're talking about becomes less realistic because you can't rely. There's no dependability there. We need to see some more consistency from him as the season draws out.
I think an interesting wild card for them as well is I think when Breece Hall went down, and again, I still think we're all in this boat. Like that was a huge blow to this team. But Michael Carter was a good running back for them last year. He was good in tandem with Breece Hall this year as well. He was good today. He was breaking tackles against defensive linemen, against linebackers, against third level defenders, contact balance. Yes, like slippery. Some power, some good contact balance. We know he has the speed to hit the corner. And then he didn't even really get to show his best attribute, which is his pass catching ability coming out of the backfield today. If he can give them, I don't want to say Breece Hall level production, but if you can, and James Robinson is fun. That's a cool tandem potentially going forward. And if they can be able to rely on that obviously makes Zach Wilson's job so much easier. If they can keep getting that running game going and then you mix in some of the play action, or if defenses like what the Bills did today, just let them run stick or short routes every time and just allow him to go 1, 2, 3, catch, pivot, like that helps for him as well. But I think that's a huge piece too. Like if Michael Carter can continue to play solidly, or if they just get some semblance of good production from the run game, could be very interesting. I'm very interested to see what this Jets team does. Man, the state of New York, the state of New York is the Bills. The state of New Jersey is on one right now. Man, what
it is so weird to me, and I'm sure we're going to transition to the next game, but it is so weird to me with Michael Carter from like the time of UNC all the way till now. No matter where he's at, he's always got another running back breathing down his neck. Like,
right?
I think it's a coaching thing. I think coaches don't believe he can carry the workload, even though he shows like, in short samples that he can, but long term, it seems like there's this unwillingness to count on him to take the lion's share of the workload at the running back position.
Yeah, I also think that's a good point too. Like when Breece went down, I was like, oh, well, it's the Michael Carter show. And they were like, we're bringing in James Robinson. I was like, oh, okay. I get it more with North Carolina. Like Javonte Williams is sick. Like I get it. But also, I really thought but also too, like Ty Johnson is no slouch. And Ty Johnson and Michael Carter were a cool tandem last year. So I thought like, okay, they'll go back to that tandem. But the fact that they brought James Robinson in like immediately, and I was like, oh, damn, like they really don't have faith in Carter. But he's a good running back.
They didn't even give him a shot.
Right? Yeah. They don't believe in him. Like it's
weird.
It is weird. It's also weird that they have 2 Michael Carters and they have Michael Carter slot corner. I find that very annoying. It's tremendously. I said something on Twitter. I was like, oh, great play by Michael Carter. They're like, oh, he plays running back. I was like, oh, there's 2 of them. Like
from the same draft class, I think.
Yeah, they're literally from the same draft class. It's so dumb.